Hey all y'all, welcome back to my channel. My name is Carrie. This is where I talk about knitting, my tips, my tricks, my opinions, my preferences, and today we're going to do a little knit tea, and I'm going to share with you my unpopular knitting opinions. Well, at least some of my unpopular knitting opinions, because I got lots of unpopular knitting opinions. If you want to find out if you agree or disagree with me, hit subscribe, hit the notification bell, and let's spill some tea. Unpopular knitting opinions. I don't know. I like I like unpopular opinion videos. I think it's fun to find out, so much of knitting is just about what your personal preferences are, and it's fun to find out what people's own preferences are and why they like things the way they like them. And you never know what you're going to learn from it. I mean, sometimes in listening to a unpopular opinion, you actually find out like, oh, I never thought of it that way. Maybe I should try knitting, in this way that they like and see if maybe I would enjoy it now that I know more about it. So for today's knit tea, I'm going to just be working on a sample of a short row heel and toe that I'm going to do for that now famous, well, maybe not famous. If you've been watching my channel, you know that I keep talking about doing this video where I demonstrate my favorite short row toe and heel for socks. And I'm knitting up a sample of the toe for that video. So to do this sample, to get it started, I'm going to be using Judy's Magic Cast On. And I'm just going to cast on 36 stitches total, 18 on each needle. This is my favorite cast on for starting toe-up socks. And you'll see this is what's called a closed cast on, meaning I don't have an opening here. So I have an equal number of loops on both sides of the needle. Now I'm going to just knit one plain round of knitting before I start the toe, because right now these are just loops of yarn, and I actually would like to start with some actual stitches. When I knit socks, my preference is to work with 2 circular needles at a time. But for this little sample that I'm doing worsted weighted yarn, I'm just going ahead and using Magic Loop. This is a 32-inch circular. I never knit socks on deep hands, truth be told. I prefer the organization of sock knitting with 2 circular needles or Magic Loop over DPNs. So that's just a personal preference. I don't hate DPNs. I actually really like using DPNs for making gloves. I don't know why. I just do. Once you get the hang of them, DPNs are fun. At some point, I will probably do a video of my top tips. Ooh. At some point, I'll probably do a video on my top tips. Oops, there we go. For working on DPNs. Let me know if you're interested in that. You can add it to my list of things to work on. Okay, now I'm all set up to start my short row heel sample. So let's just jump into my first unpopular opinion. I think row counters are totally unnecessary. My problem with row counters is they're easy to lose, and I would rather use stitch markers and being able to read my knitting to keep track of my work rather than a row counter. I just find it's an extra piece of equipment that half the time when I did use a row counter, I would forget to click after each row anyway. So then I'd be counting my rows to figure out how do I get my stitch counter back up to the correct count. Oops, dropped a stitch. It's okay, I saved it. Save the stitch. Here we go. Okay. Done. Part of the reason I'm bringing this up is I was talking with the knitter, and she was all upset because she couldn't find her row counter for a project. And she was like, Carrie, I'm going to have to frog my entire project because I can't find my row counter and I'm so upset. And, is there an app that you like? And I was like, why would you frog your entire project because you can't find a row counter? It's like, well, I don't know where I am in my pattern now. I was like, well, let's sit down and let's count your rows. Let's look at your work and we can figure this out. And I think there's a lot of knitters, we are taught how to knit. We understand how to do the physical actions, we can read the pattern and follow the directions, but we don't always understand how to read our knitting. One of the reasons I love charts, actually, is because it is very easy with charts to keep track of your work without a row counter. I mean, you do a row, you have a stop, think, talk. If I have a chart, a knitting chart in front of me, whether it's color or lace, whatever kind of knitting chart it is, I have that in front of me. I have a post-it, just needs to be a post-it. I finish a row, I very easily move that post-it up on the chart, blocking out everything above it, and I can see where I am. And when I come back to my project, I can see where I am on the chart and I know where I am in my knitting. But what if I lose the post-it? And that has happened to me where I've been following a chart and the post-it has fallen off. And I'm like, oh, damn, I need to take a minute. At the same time, I'm like, I just need to take a minute, look at where I am on this pattern, see what row that matches up with the chart, and I know exactly where I am again. I love using scrap yarns on a project to keep track of how many rows I've done. I have a video up on how to use interlocking stitch markers to track your shaping rows. I'll link it up here. There's all sorts of tools and knowledge that we can use where we don't have to rely on clicking. Trust me, I say let go of the row counter, let go of the knitting apps. Use stitch markers, use charts, use your ability to read the knitting. Knitting faster does not make you a better, more proficient knitter, and that we get too hung up on this idea of knitting faster. I see it on boards all the time. Oh, I want to be able to knit faster. I'm thinking about switching from this way to knitting to that way of knitting so I can knit faster. How can I knit faster? As if knitting faster is the end-all, be-all measure of whether you're a good knitter, and it's not. Knitting faster just means you can knit faster. I feel like a bit of a hypocrite because my most popular video is Knit Faster with Lever Knitting. And I named it that because I do think if you're an English knitter that you can knit faster using lever knitting. And I know people are interested in being able to knit faster. So it would be a way for people to click on my video. So it's not exactly clickbait because it's honest, but I think sometimes people feel like they see people on the YouTubes knitting and they're like, oh, look how fast they knit. They're such a good knitter. I wish I could be as good as them, and I'm slow and I'm not a good knitter. You are not a good or bad knitter based on how fast you knit. So that's good. I mean, so if you feel like you're a slow knitter, which you're probably not as slow as you think you are, but you're getting good even tension and you're enjoying yourself, then don't be down on yourself about it. There's like no need. I understand some people feel like if they knit faster, they can get through more projects. I haven't done any scientific studies on this, but I'm not sure that logic holds. I think the way that you're able to produce more knitting projects is be able to devote more time to knitting. I'm not positive that being able to knit 1 or 2 stitches faster per minute is going to be the make it or break it between being able to finish a sweater in a month versus 6 weeks. Whether you knit fast or you knit slow, I'm going to say it a million times, if you enjoy what you're doing, if you're pain-free, if you have good even tension, you are a great knitter. And I think we should think about how quickly we knit as a byproduct of becoming a more proficient knitter rather than thinking of knitting faster as a goal in and of itself. Yarn bowls are pointless. They're not pointless. I'm being dramatic. I don't want to offend anybody who loves their yarn bowl. It does help with tension to have your yarn on the floor when you're knitting. And I understand that a yarn bowl is an attractive, clean space to put that ball of yarn in so that it's on the floor and helping with that tension. And it's attractive, it's pretty. There are some very pretty yarn bowls, okay? Don't get me wrong. But I could spend $20 on a yarn bowl, or I could use a shoebox and do pretty much the same thing. A yarn bag, I'm very big on my yarn bags, does the exact same thing as a yarn bowl, and is more travel friendly, I might add. 1, 2, 3, okay, this is 4. Although, oh, and this is my addendum to yarn bowls being pointless. I don't like when yarn bowls or bags have a closed hole to put the yarn through, so that the only way, once you've put the yarn through and you've started the project, the only way that yarn is coming out of the hole is if either you come to the end of the ball or you clip the yarn. Don't like that. I don't think that's functional. If you're going to use a yarn bowl, it needs to have an opening so you can take your yarn in and out of it. The other problem with yarn bowls, I mean, come on. If you're doing a project where you're doing stranded color work or more than one ball of yarn, how many yarn bowls are you going to have around you? I just don't think they're as, they're pretty. I think yarn bowls are pretty. That's it. I think they're pretty. All right, so for my last knitting opinion, I actually need to put my knitting aside. I got to grab something. All right, so Elizabeth Zimmerman is a very influential and important person in the knitting world and history. She did a lot to promote the craft and popularize it and teach people, and her book, Knitting Without Tears, is really, I think, probably considered one of the most important seminal works in the knitting book history. I personally think it's overrated.
Sorry, I'm hearing like the screams of knitters who love this book everywhere, rising up and going, what?
I should probably preface this by saying that when I learned how to knit, this is a more recent purchase for me. I had already had quite a collection of knitting reference books, including Principles of Knitting, Reader's Digest, Knitter's Handbook, Vogue Knitting. So I had already read a lot about knitting and learned a lot about knitting before I got to this book. So I think in some ways I probably wasn't the right audience for it. Because it says right here, basic techniques and easy to follow directions for garments to fit all sizes. So the information in here is very foundational, which is great. A lot of knitters need this, and it is presented in a very approachable way. At times it feels almost like you're reading the journal of a knitter and what they like and what they don't like and how they do things, and there is a delightfulness to it that I cannot deny. And I think that this book did a lot in terms of popularizing the SSK decrease, which I do love. I think that's fantastic. But my biggest gripe about this book is that she does say up front, her first chapter is called Opinionated Knitter, okay? So it's not like she's hiding anything. But I think there was a lot of things that she presented in this book that were her opinion, that were her preferences, that she presented as fact, and have become these common bits of wisdom that may or may not be true. I think this is especially true around continental knitting. There's a lot of great things about continental knitting. There's a lot of great things about English style knitting. There's pros and cons to both of them. I have my own personal preference. One day I will do a video on it. But in this book, Elizabeth Zimmerman said that continental knitting was faster and more efficient than English knitting. And it became this piece of wisdom that I don't think is necessarily true, where it was, in her opinion, faster and more efficient for herself. I've talked about this before. I will talk about it again here. I feel like in the last 15 years or so, there has been almost this pressure on people who knit English style to switch to continental for reasons. Because it's supposedly faster and more efficient, even though, and things are thrown out like the fastest knitters of the world knit continental. Some of the fastest knitters in the world knit continental. Some of the fastest knitters in the world knit how I do, which is lever style. And let's also remember what I just said at the very beginning, or just previously, depending on how I edit this, knitting faster is not necessarily better. So if you love knitting continental, great. that's wonderful. But I think we should be also loving on English style knitting as well. And I kind of take issue with this book for, you know, presenting this information as if it were fact, and I'm not sure it is fact. Has there been a scientific study on this? I don't know. What is more efficient anyway? I mean, I get it. When you knit continental, it is a smoother motion than what it is when you knit English. But is that more efficient? Is the purl stitch in continental knitting more efficient? I would argue that it's not. Again, that's a whole other video.
Pull it in, Carrie. Pull it in. I have very strong feelings about this, apparently.
Now, would I say don't buy this book? No. I mean, if you're interested in knitting without tears, if you find that this is the style of knitting reference book that really speaks to you, that makes things understandable for you, great. You know, it's another tool in the toolbox. But I would just, you know, read it with an eye towards understanding what is in it that's actually just a preference as opposed to what is factual. And don't get me wrong, all knitting reference books are susceptible to this. Principles of Knitting and Reader's Digest Handbook would both tell you to never learn how to knit from me because I use a pencil grip. Now, if you watched my Knit Faster with Lever Knitting video, again, up here for you, you'll know why I think that they give that piece of advice and why that piece of advice is wrong. So yeah, Knitting Without Tears. It's an important knitting book. There is good information in it. I just think it's overrated. So here is where I am with my short row toe sample. I've actually have finished the first set of short rows. So if you want to find out how I finish this off and what is my favorite short row teal and hoe.
Teal and hoe?
If you want to find out how I finish off this short row toe sample and what is my favorite short row toe and heel technique, which is not the one that I think most of us are taught, then subscribe to my channel, hit the notification bell, which will let you know whenever I upload a new video. If you enjoyed today's video, please give it a thumbs up, share it with your knitting friends. I would love to hear all about your knitting opinions, popular, unpopular. Do you disagree with me vehemently? Do you agree with me enthusiastically? Let me know in the comments. Or you can find me on social media. All my social media is in the description box below. As always, I hope you have a wonderful day, evening, weekend, weeknight, weekday. Did I say weekend already? I think I did. Whatever time of day you're watching this, I hope you have a wonderful one. And as always, happy knitting. Bye. Short row teal and hoe. If you want to find... I need a minute. Hey y'all, there's a phone ringing. Stop ringing, phone. Rude. Rude, rude. Alright. Hey y'all. Welcome back to my channel. My name is Carrie. This is where I talk about knitting, my tips, my tricks, my opinions, my... I love knitting charts, by the way. Ooh. Oh, and maybe that's an unpopular opinion. I know. That's not so much an unpopular opinion as it is a polarizing opinion. Oh, there's an idea for a knit tee. Polarizing opinions. You know, if you want to start a knitting smackdown, throw out this question. Charts. For knitting all your sweaters in the round or for doing all your knitters. All your knitters. Short row, heel, and toe. Short row, heel, and toe. Short row, heel, and toe.